We're about to teach you the 5 best pickleball serves for 2025 so you can dominate every point from the start.
Go ahead and subscribe, and let's get into the first serve, the side spinner. A couple years ago, the spin serve was legal, and this was really effective because as that ball hit the ground, it kicked really hard. But that's now illegal, and the side spinner is taking its place. Here's how you do it. Number 1, you want to make sure your paddle tip is facing towards the ground. This is essential for pretty much any serve that we do, but it's also a rule. You can't make contact when your paddle tip is above your wrist. So for any of these serves, paddle tip has to be below your wrist. Just so you know, we're going to teach these as right-handers, so if you're left-handers, just flip everything. You're probably used to it anyways. The first thing I like to do is step across with my right foot to get some added space this way, and then I'll drop the ball and swipe across it like this. And because I'm making contact in an upwards motion, it's totally fine. The main thing to look out for is keeping your paddle face completely still for the entire duration of the swing. You don't want to have any variation in the direction that your paddle is facing. So keep paddle face this way, and then you're going to brush along the back side of this ball to create this sort of like spinning motion. Once again, I'm going upwards in the actual contact. It's just hard to show that when I'm using my hands. But we're going to try to get across the back side of this ball, and then as this ball flies through the air, you're going to see it actually move through the air and curve. We'll show you a couple of these just using the motion, and then we'll show you what it looks like on the other side of the court. Here. A really crucial part of the side spinner is that you can use it depending on where your opponent is standing. So in this example, my opponent is standing towards his corner. If I hit this serve really well, it'll be moving away from him, making it incredibly hard for him to hit a good return. So the first thing I like to do is show that I'm hitting a normal serve. If you'll notice, my feet are perfectly straight as if I'd be doing my regular serving motion. This will probably tell him he's okay standing where he is. But at the last second, pivot off this left foot, and then now I'm in this side spin motion. And let's see what this looks like in practice. So regular serve, and then last second here, side spin, kicks away from him, throws him into his partner. It's a really lethal serve. I'm not sure if you can tell on camera as much, but the balls kick a lot, and most importantly, they move through the air a tremendous amount. And as you can imagine, that same thing applies on the forehand side. So for all of those shots, I was stepping across and hitting a backhand, but you can really easily hit the exact same thing on your forehand. Most of the time for this shot, I'm holding more semi-western, so my paddle face is more open. If I was continental, it would be more closed. So I'm more open here, and then on the forehand, exact same thing. Try to brush across that back side of the ball in an upwards motion, and then keep this paddle face in the same direction the entire time. And the really important part about this serve is you can make it look like it's going to land in the wrong court. So as you're about to see, I'm going to hit this ball. It'll make it look like it's going to land in the wrong service court, but then it'll dip over into the proper court at the last second. This same motion is going to apply to the short corner serve that Caleb is about to teach you.
Our next serve for number 2 kind of plays off what we just learned with the forehand side spinner. So for this one, our main goal is to throw our opponent off by hitting a ball that is so short it feels unreachable. We're going to follow that same motion of that swiping across your body forehand motion, because we want the ball to spin to the right and away from our opponent like before, but this time the other direction. On top of that, we're going to add one more element, which is hitting this ball short in the service box, which means the ball is going to essentially skid and stop before your opponent is able to reach it. Or at best, they'll make bad contact. To hit this serve, I like to remove as many variables as possible. Making a giant swing at it, one, tells my opponent what I'm about to do, but also makes it tougher to time the initial contact point. We're not worried about creating an incredible amount of spin with this one. We're just worried about getting the accuracy right, so that way it's difficult for our opponent to return. I like to shorten my swing just a bit, more like this, because that's easier for me to time and is also less readable for my opponent when I'm lining up for the serve. Whereas if I were to do one big exaggerated motion, they might know that I'm going for a short corner and go ahead and run up and get ready to hit it. Big thing with this one is we really have to focus on our aim. So there's a specific target we're looking for. We want to aim for the short corner of the service box. So that means this general space right here, where the kitchen line meets the sidelines. We don't have to do it perfect. I suggest not aiming for a small target like the very corner itself. Instead, you want to aim in this area. Make a larger area that you're comfortable shooting for, because you don't want to miss this serve. It's very easy for it to go out, and that would cost you the point outright. So go for margin, don't go for perfect accuracy. But with some practice, you'll be able to narrow that target down a little bit smaller. But it doesn't have to just be that corner I just showed you. It also works from the opposite side. So let's say you're serving from the right side side to the left across. There's a different short corner we can aim for, and this time it's closer to the middle. So now we're aiming for this box here because again, the ball is going to bounce away to the other service box and that makes it difficult for your opponent to reach. So depending on where you're standing, it changes your target. On this side, we aim for the short corner that's closer to the right. And on this side, we're aiming for the short corner that's also more of a cross court angle. And just to reiterate one more time, this is better to do with your forehand than your backhand because kind of like Shay showed us with the side spinner, the backhand doing this big motion, stepping and making a big swing kind of tells your opponents you're about to slice the ball. So most likely this works when you're lining up for a serve and then at the last minute, you stop and do a short corner. For this serve, I'm looking for when my opponent is standing too far back, so it's going to be difficult for them to run all the way up to the kitchen to get the serve, or also when they're standing too close to the middle line, because again, they have to run all the way across, and that's a lot of movement they have to time before making the return. So we notice our opponent standing too far back, we line up for the regular serve, and then follow with the short corner when they least expect it. This also works just as well on the opposite side. Oh, money.
A few years ago, I was playing with a high-level pro and we were playing singles, and instead of doing all this spin stuff, he literally just hit a very hard topspin serve to the short corner and it aced me almost every single time. It's a really hard serve to do, but there are some things that can make it easier. Number one is just having a short swing. So instead of having a really big motion here, on this serve, keep it nice and short. And then number two is not adding so much topspin. Really focus on the placement and not about the amount of spin or the power of this serve. So let me show you what that looks like in practice. You can imagine that if I was playing singles, my opponent would be far back and they'd probably be shading towards their forehand so they can take more of the returns on their forehand. In that case, all I have to do is hit the short corner really soft. Pretty simple.
Do you have pickleballs?
We know you've been working on your serve, but it's time to work on yourself with the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra from Manscaped, who sponsor this video. The star of the show is the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. It features two interchangeable skin-safe blade heads, the trimmer blade for precision, and the foil blade for the close calls.
And one of the best features on the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra is the LED spotlight. It's a dual temperature LED that adapts to different skin tones, so you always know exactly when you're making contact.
And of course, it's waterproof, so you can level up your pickleball's game even in the shower.
And the Performance Package even has the Weed Whacker 2.0, which is good for your nose and ear hairs. Plus, it's got that skin-safe technology, and it's even waterproof.
And finally, once you're all done, you can use the Crop Soother Ball Aftershave, and then finally the Crop Preserver to make sure your pickleballs are scratch-free and smell fantastic.
The kit also comes with 2 free gifts. We've got the Boxers 2.0 and the Shed 2.0 travel bag. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra from Manscaped has literally everything you need to make sure your pickleballs are in tournament level condition this holiday season. You can use our promo code, which is right here for you, so you can get 20% off plus free international shipping worldwide. Trust us, your pickleballs will thank you. Thank you.
As you just saw in some of those short angle serves and the side spinner serves, there's a little bit of gray area with how you're making contact with the ball. But the way to get around that is to utilize the drop serve. The reason why the drop serve is so important is because whenever you drop the ball and let it bounce, it completely removes all of the restrictions on how you can make contact with the ball. Meaning that if you drop the ball, let it hit the ground, I can now slice really hard down on the ball without having to worry about where my contact point is in relation to my body or where my paddle head is in relation to my wrist. A couple of really quick rules here. You can drop the ball as high as you want to. I personally recommend standing more on your tiptoes and dropping it from really high. That way it bounces the highest possible distance up. But what you cannot do is propel the ball down in any way. So if you're dropping the ball, even if it's from this high, you have to simply drop the ball. You cannot throw it down. Additionally, on a drop serve, you can't throw the ball up and then let it bounce higher. If you're doing a regular volley serve, you can throw the ball up and take it out of the air before it hits the ground. That's totally fine. The first type of drop serve that I like to do is a slice drop serve. To do this one, I'll hold the paddle with a more continental grip. I'm going to put the tip of the paddle above my wrist. Second thing I'll do, stand up nice and tall, drop the ball, and then as that ball is bouncing and then rising, I'm going to chop down the back side of the ball, keeping my paddle facing the direction I want to hit the ball. And this will provide a tremendous amount of backspin on the ball, making it bounce really low when it goes over the net. Here's a quick example. Nice and high, drop the ball, big chop. One thing you really have to worry about on this type of serve is your margin. So because this ball has backspin, it tends to stay level and maybe even rise slightly in the path. So to get this ball to land in the court, you're going to have to probably barely clear this net. Any higher, it's likely to go out, and any lower, of course, it'll hit the net. It's a very low margin of error serve, but if you can get it successfully over the net, it's extremely effective. Of course, you can just take some power and spin off of it, but it won't be quite as effective of a serve. Of course, you can do the same thing with your backhand as well. The problem with using the backhand though is it's pretty obvious you're about to hit a slice. However, if you're very confident in your backhand slice, it's probably okay. If you're coming from a tennis background, you probably have an incredibly good backhand slice. So this is a way that you can use that as a weapon on your serve. Simply just drop the ball nice and high, and then you can use your regular backhand slice just like you would in a game. The next type of drop serve that I like to use is just a standard driving drop serve. So a lot of people have incredibly good forehand drives, but for some reason that doesn't translate as well to a volley serve. I think it's probably a timing thing where when this ball bounces, you have a cue as to now that ball is bouncing, it's about time to hit the ball. And because of that, you can usually make better contact and hit a more powerful serve. So I personally like to drop the ball nice and high so it bounces higher. But for a lot of people, just dropping it at chest height might give a more consistent bounce and less variation in your serve. In just a moment, Caleb is going to talk to you about the power serve, and a lot of those same concepts apply here. But for now, just know more of an open stance, maybe slightly closed, but a lot of weight on your back leg. Drop the ball, and then you can hit a regular forehand drive, and it'll be a very effective serve. Here's a fun fact about the drop serve that you might not know that you can use as a strategy. When you drop the ball, it doesn't matter how many times it bounces. If I drop this ball and it bounces 4 times, that's totally okay. I can still serve the ball. So very often you can catch your opponent off guard by dropping the ball, letting it bounce 1, 2, 3 times, and then serving it. That's also legal.
Now, this wouldn't be a proper serve video if we didn't show you one of the most popular serves that people like to practice, which is the power serve. Because let's be honest, a ball coming rocketing at your opponent is always tough to return no matter where you hit it on the court. So we're gonna show you 3 big tips that can take your power to a whole nother level and add some speed to your serves. So let's go through it. Step 1, a lot of people undervalue is your point of contact on a power serve. So there's a lot of options. We obviously have to hit an upward motion when it comes to a volley serve, unlike the drop serve that Shay just showed you. But our goal with a power serve is to hit it as flat and kind of like a laser over the net if possible. This is gonna vary just a bit from person to person because height does make a difference here, but we wanna hit the ball at the highest point of contact possible while still making an upward motion and making sure that our wrist is still above the tip of our paddle. For me, this falls about right here when I make a proper power serve because my wrist is still above my tip. I'm able to hit a flat shot over the net without adding a bunch of topspin so it stays in. Because the more topspin you add to your power serve, the less actual speed the ball has. It's still gonna kick well over the other side, but for just straight up power, we wanna hit as flat as possible. So that starts with a high point of contact. The next and probably biggest way to add the most power to your serve is to utilize your body's weight and mass into the ball when you make contact. So there's 2 big ways I like to do that. First is starting low. Instead of starting from an upright position, get low. This gets you in an athletic ready stance, and that way when you swing through the ball, you can rise and then close your hips with power, which allows you to bring your whole torso's weight into the ball. So a lot of your power really comes from that hip closing motion. So right here, we're open. And as we come through the ball, we're going to close our hips, which brings our paddle around. And that's when we transfer the weight from our body into the ball. So I'll show you an example without closing my hips so you can see just using my arm what this gonna look like. Here's the exact same serve, but this time I'm going to incorporate my hips to add that extra power. So to show you what I mean, I'm gonna first show you an example of not closing my hips and just using my arm, and you'll see how much power that generates just from my arm itself. So here we go. Decent serve, it got deep, but you're about to see a lot more power when I add my body weight into the ball. So same thing, but this time I'm going to close my hips through the shot. Just like that. Totally different serve. It's a game changer. Don't just use your arm, close your hips through the ball. The last thing I want to cover here is where your power serve should be aiming. A lot of people like to just hit their power serves in, which of course is step 1, but step 2 is making the most of your aim. There's 3 big areas we like to aim for when we're hitting a power serve, and I'll explain why. The first is the body. So we're aiming right in between Shay's feet here. This ball is really tough for Shay because it either forces an awkward motion or it forces him to move out of the way and make a wide step, and that's just more factors he has to make into his swing, which often leads to errors. errors. The second place we like to aim is Shay's backhand. As a rule of thumb, most players in pickleball struggle more with their backhand than their forehand, so we like to target that as much as possible to make him hit a shot that he's hopefully uncomfortable with. But finally, my favorite area to aim is the space in between. So we're talking in between the body and in between the backhand, so really that's just going to be right next to Shay's left foot right here. This shot right here forces Shay to make a decision every time it lands there. Is he going to make a step to hit a forehand, which means he has to step around the ball, which introduces a lot of movement, or is he gonna suck it up and hit it with his backhand? Either way, that takes decision-making time away from Shay and it forces him to hit an awkward shot, and that's more beneficial to us and leads to more errors.
What you're probably realizing from all these different serves is that variation is the key to being a very lethal server. So the next serve, which is our last serve, is in my opinion, one of the best, and that's the deep lob serve. Now I know what you're thinking, it's probably very evident how to hit this, but I promise there's a couple of key things that you want to keep in mind when hitting this serve. So of course this deep lob serve is a serve where we're standing like we're hitting our regular power serve, but instead we hit a lob serve that lands ideally somewhere around this back area of the court. Now the reason you want it to land this far back is because the closer it lands to the kitchen, your opponents are going to have an easier time putting a lot of power back on the return and make you have a difficult time hitting your third shot. So really the key here is to get this ball deep and to hit it high, but not too high to where the ball bounces up incredibly high and then they hit the ball back to you. Now, one thing that's kind of funny about this and a little unintuitive is that whenever you hit this high lob serve, very often your opponents are going to hit a lob return back. I don't know why this happens, but I promise you it happens all the time. When I hit this high lob serve, they hit a high lob return back. Now it's my turn to hit a third shot, and that ball's probably somewhere around the middle of the court, bouncing nice and high, and I can destroy my third shot drive. One of the major keys about this shot is you don't want it to just be flat. The flatter you hit this ball, the more true the bounce is going to be. And the real key to this serve is when it bounces, it's variable and it will throw off your opponent's timing. So when I hit this shot, I like to get nice and low and then brush up the back side of the ball, really trying to stay underneath it, keeping my paddle face directly facing my target, and then really just using my hips and my knees to stand up and hit this ball high. I try not to use too much of an arm motion in this serve because it adds a layer of variability to it. Instead, just rely on your body and make sure that your paddle is facing the right direction. Something like this. Here. That was pretty much perfect. And just one final note here on this serve, the best time to use it is at the beginning or the end of a match, where it's likely that your opponent is feeling nervous and they don't want to make a mistake. They'll usually baby the ball back, not hit it quite as hard, and then you can have an easier time on your third.
Now you know the 5 best pickleball serves for 2025.
Subscribe if you want more content like this, and YouTube really thinks you're going to like this video next.
So good.
You should click on it.
Definitely.